Buenas tardes a todos. Les doy la bienvenida al Centro del Japón. Muchas gracias a todos por acompañarnos en este día tan especial. Quiero agradecerles esta asistencia al centro en la tarde. Este es un espacio organizado por la Dirección de Internacionalización de la Universidad de los Andes, el Centro de Japón y la Agencia de Cooperación Japonesa. Mi nombre es Catalina González Uribe y es un placer para mí ser hoy la maestra de ceremonias. Quiero agregar a esta descripción que en 2012 el señor Tanaka recibió la medalla de la cinta púrpura por sus logros académicos, que en 2018 visitó la Universidad de los Andes con el fin de darnos una conferencia y estuvo muy de cerca en todo el proyecto que constituyó construir el centro en el que nos encontramos en este momento. En esta oportunidad, el señor Tanaka nos dio una conferencia sobre ambiente de seguridad en Asia Oriente. Y desde el 1 de abril de 2022 es presidente de la Agencia de Cooperación Internacional de Japón, JICA, por segunda vez. Es un honor para nosotros contar nuevamente con esta visita, con su presencia, con su compañía. Quiero dar inicio entonces a la conferencia del día de hoy, El mundo y Japón posterior a la Guerra Fría, a cargo del señor Tanaka. Luego de esta intervención tendremos un espacio de conversación para el cual hemos invitado a la profesora del Departamento de Ciencia Política y Estudios Globales, que nos acompaña el día de hoy, Carolina Urrego Sandoval. Y posteriormente tendremos una sesión de preguntas al final moderada por la profesora. Señor Tanaka, adelante, por favor, y muchas gracias.
Can you hear me? Please wait for a moment. I have mixed up all documents while I was visiting Vice President's office. And I think I'm supposed to talk about 30 minutes. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to be back at the University of Los Andes. As was explained, I was here in 2018, and I was privileged enough to give a talk on international relations in East Asia then in 2018. Today, I would like to talk more about Japan and its relations with the world. I'd like to move. Essentially, what I would want to convey to you is this simple sentence. Japan, in the post-Cold War period, is a mature, liberal democratic, global civilian power in an increasingly tense geopolitical international politics. If you remember this sentence, you don't need to listen to me anymore. First, mature. Mature, I chose it as a good word. Differently put, you may call it aging, old, outdated. But I would like to put before you a better meaning of such a condition. Next, please. This is a population pyramid in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. Quite straightforward triangle. After the war, many kids were born, and the people will die as the age goes by. This has changed in the succeeding years, and this is next, please. 1970s, those baby boomers became old. Those are the largest population segment. But then, following the baby boomers born in the aftermath of the Second World War, less and less kids were born. And next, please. This 1990. This is the baby boomers, the largest population segment. And then the population declined a bit, but then here's another large segment. This is the children of baby boomers. And then after the children of baby boomers, the population declined. Next, please. And this is the most recent pattern. Still, the baby boomers now in the years 70, so they are the largest segment of the population. Well, incidentally, I do not belong to baby boomer. I'm just following baby boomer. And then there is a children of baby boomers, but then interestingly, there are no bulge among the grandchildren of baby boomers. Children of baby boomers were not a sizable segment of a population. And this picture indicates the current Japan's population structure. And then, baby boomers goes on getting old, maintaining the largest segment, and then the children of baby boomers goes. And next, please. This is the so-called the graph of fertility rate. How many kids a woman give birth to is this number. And unless you have 2 or 2.1, population will not reproduce. And Japan is this. Previously, Japan has more than 2. And that was the time of 1950 when the population pyramid was, a triangle. But then it declined, and then to become less than 1.5, and then nearly 1.2. And then bounced back a bit, but then still going down in 1.6. Well, incidentally, declining fertility is a fairly common pattern. The more rapid decline is observed in South Korea. This is South Korea. South Korea's fertility rate now is less than 1. Italy is somewhere around similar to Japan. And well, blue is the United States. The United States is a fairly young population, still less than 2. And this is Colombia. Colombia too is following the pattern of declining fertility. And so eventually you will lose population. Next, please. And now Japan has 128 million as of January the 1st. This is a 530,000 decline from the previous year. And every year Japan loses more than 500,000. And then eventually, well, this is a different pattern of projection, but by the end of this century, the most pessimistic scenario indicates Japan's population could become nearly 60 million. So Japan is a aging society, society that will decrease its population. But next one. But well, this may sound too pessimistic, but the Japanese old people nowadays don't die. The life expectancy, well, this is a life expectancy is the vertical size, and then the horizontal size is GDP size. And Japan is a fairly big country in terms of GDP. United States is the largest GDP country. China is the second. Japan is the third. But then among those large economies, Japan's life expectancy is the highest. You know, of course, I'm kidding. You know, the people will die. But it seems that many of my, you know, friends in the older age don't appear to die. You know, I think the JICA chair program, which was conducted previously, was given by a professor called Morichi. And he's somebody who doesn't seem to die. And so Japan is an aging society, a society of losing population, but tends to be quite healthy. Well, this despite the COVID-19, life expectancy doesn't decline in Japan. Next, please. Well, Japan is a safe society. Maybe Japanese are too old to kill each other. But this horizontal cycle is the population size. Japan is a fairly large country in terms of population. But then this is a homicide rate per 100,000. Japan's annual homicide rate is less than 0.3 per 100,000. Very few people are being killed by others. And again, maybe Japanese are too old to kill each other. But safety is a good thing, isn't it? And so, well, next, please. So Japan, as a society, is a losing society population, but it's quite mature, and old people are quite active and quite safe. Japan is also, I think, a mature economy, and again, you know, you can use a much more nasty word to describe the current condition. But next, please. This is the Japan's GDP, real GDP. That is a GDP measured by constant yen. And then this graph is from 1960 to 2021. And if you see, this steep increasing curve until around this time. This is the beginning of 1990s. So Japan has experienced a rapid growth in the many decades after the Second World War. But after the end of the Cold War, which is the subject period of today, After somewhere around this, the curve appears to be slower than this. So from 1990 or so, Japan is experiencing slower growth. There's some, nasty comments said that Japan is a stagnant economy, no hope of growth. But I would argue the slow growth may not be so bad. Slow but steady is a good thing, isn't it? Next, please. Well, this simply shows the growth rate. In the period before 1990, Japan's annual growth rate is sometimes more than 10% and 7%, and very high growth. And the Japanese Prime Minister in 1960 said Japan he had a plan of doubling income. Well, if you have 7% growth, the economy would double itself in 10 years. And in fact, that happened. But sometime around 1990s, the growth rate has become going down. And well, this is the global financial crisis caused by the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. And then this, of course, is the COVID-19. So negative growth, but then overall, Japan's growth rate is just 1% or 2%. Next, please. The growth is slow, but prices don't increase. In the 1970s, inflation rate was as high as 20 to 25%. But since the beginning of 1990s, the price in Japan haven't increased much. And most things are more or less the same level of price until quite recently. And this indicates only until 2021, but the last year, because of the war in Ukraine and the shortage of energy and shortage of food, the current consumer price index in Tokyo is about 5%. But in comparison with many other countries, 5% growth may not be so high. Next, please. The Japanese economies experience slow growth, not much high inflation, and this is the stock markets. Those who argue that Japan is a stagnant economy says what happened here in the early 1990s. Well, if you remember a previous graph, until about this point, Japan's growth rate was quite steep. And then around this time, from then on, growth rate declined. And then, well, given, if you look at stock market, it's not the slow growth, it's a huge decline. It's called the burst of the bubble in the 1970s. And then stock prices stagnated for a quite long time. But sometime around 2012, stock prices have come back. And that indicates Japanese economy is not simply stagnant. There are many companies whose stock prices are increasing. That it's not as high as at the time of the bubble, but about a similar rate as of 2021. And so that I would say Japanese economy is more mature rather than stagnant. Next, please. The Japanese steady economy is not so wasteful. This is what's called the energy intensity index. That is the how much energy you have to use to produce 1 unit of GDP. In order to produce certain things, you have to put energy. Previously, China has a high energy intensity. That means in order to grow 1%, China had to input a huge amount of energy. And China has experienced saving a lot of energy and has declined very much. And somewhere around here, China is more energy efficient than Canada now. But still well over the world average. And Japan's energy intensity has consistently been quite low. And so does Germany. And Germany, Japan's quite energy efficient economy. And in comparison, for example, with the United States, China, or Canada. The next, please. Well, this is the most important number we have to pay attention to under the circumstances of climate change. This is the changing pattern of greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emission, 80% of greenhouse gas emission is a carbon dioxide, but there are methanes and many other. And then this indicates the huge growth of China's emission. China used to emit greenhouse gas less than the United States or European Union. But now China's emission is more than twice the greenhouse gas emission of the United States. And then US appears to reach the ceiling and shows decline, and the EU also shows the decline. Well, India is increasing greenhouse gas emissions. India's emission is now about the same level as the European Union. Well, Japan is very low in terms of greenhouse gas emission. That's an indication of the energy efficiency. In order to grow 1 unit of GDP, you don't have to use as much energy as in the case of China or the United States. And so Japan's economy may be very slow, but more friendly to the resolution of climate change, and more efficient in energy use. And so I would call this condition a mature economy. Next, please. Well, another adjective that I used in the first page is Japan is a liberal democratic country. And well, this is nothing new to you. Next, please. Japan has experienced many political reforms, and well, as in many other countries, people always say, politics is very bad. Politicians are corrupt, and they know nothing about reality in society. They are simply seeking power, and so there are always political reforms. Japan is no exception. And so what is called the 1955 system, dominated by Liberal Democratic Party, collapsed in the early 1990s. And electoral system was changed. And then the regulation to control the money to be used in politics tightened. And so under these political reforms, the government changes in 2009 and 2012. Next, please. These gentlemen are the prime ministers of Japan since 1990, many. Japan is one of the countries that are most productive in producing prime ministers. Sometimes we produce prime ministers every year. But despite these quick changes and others, Japan has consistently been a liberal democracy. Next, please. Well, this is the graph produced by the institute called VDEM, Variety of Democracy Institute. The institute located in Gothenburg University in Sweden. And it produces annual scores of liberal democracy of each country. And they is scored some of the countries from the 1788 at the time of French Revolution. And this is a graph of this institute's liberal democracy index of Germany, Japan, United Kingdom, United States of America. And in the 19th century, even UK or US were not so liberal, nor democratic. Remember, the US had discriminated, many people. And in the UK or US too, women didn't have voting right. And so it was only in the 20th century that liberal democracy rate increased. In the this is UK. And well, Japan's is this is a time of Meiji Restoration, introduction of modern period. And then, well, Japan went through the type of polity which probably we now call authoritarian. And then the Japanese military rule was terrible in the 1930s. After the end of the war, democracy was fully established. And so VDEM score jumped very much in the 1950s. Well, German case, Weimar Republic brought up the score, and Nazi went it down, and then went back again. And then in recent years, while Japan was going through such political reforms and others, well, scores are fairly high. This is Japan, and this is Germany and the US. US, after the civil rights movement, US democracy rate became as high as the UK or US, or Germany or Japan. And then until the time of Mr. Obama, it went high very much, but then, huge decline during the Mr. Trump's administration. But overall, these countries are quite high in their liberal democracy. And so nothing new, but despite the narratives of political reforms and corrupt politics, well, these countries are essentially maintain the liberal polity. Next, please. I think I have made the case. Japan is a mature and liberal democratic. And then how about global? And Japan has a global reach. Next, please. Well, I don't like to advertise one automobile company, but it's one typical example of Japanese company doing business all over the world. This is Toyota's overseas plants. Toyota established plants. Well, this actually didn't include plants in Japan. Toyota also has plants in Japan too. But then all over the world, Toyota established. So Japanese business are doing work globally. This is reflected, next please, is the amount of direct foreign investment Japan has made over the past years. This blue is Japan's direct investment. And just for the purpose of comparison, I put the foreign direct investment of China is red. And Japan has made foreign direct investment from 1980s and increased fairly high in the late 1980s. And then consistently made a lot more FDI than China until probably about 2010, when China surpassed Japan in terms of GDP. The China increased dramatically increased FDI, but with certain exceptions. Even in the late 2010s, Japan made larger FDI than China. And in recent, well, the year that China made larger FDIs are the 2014 and 20. And otherwise, until recently, Japan's FDI flow is larger than China's. And this, next please, will be reflected in the what's called the current account balance statistics. I think those who study international economics do not need the explanation about this. Current account indicates the money that the country earns by international interaction. And well, this is export minus import plus net earnings from abroad plus net transfer payments. This X minus M is what is called a trade balance. And NY is generally income balance or net earnings by way of remittances and others. And NCT's net transfer is often be achieved by development assistance. Japan's statistics indicates is that particularly from 1996, the current account surplus is always bigger than trade balance. This blue is the trade balance, X minus M. And current account is always bigger than trade balance. That means NY, net earnings from abroad, is very big in Japan's case. Well, this is, of course, as a result of cumulative foreign direct investment. Japan earned a lot of incomes from plants. You know, Toyota's case, plants in Bangkok, plants in the new United States, and they create a lot of income, and then those income will be transferred to Japan. And sometimes, you know, these years after the global financial crisis or during this COVID-19 case, Japan's trade balance is in the red. Japan had to pay a lot more for buying natural resources than selling manufactured goods. But current account is positive. That means income balance is in the black. For, again, a comparison, this is the current account balance of China. No, I'm sorry. Next, please. Well, this is the current account of China. China's current account, you know, is sometimes bigger than trade balance. Trade balance is blue, but not much. And in recent years, trade balance is bigger than current account balance. And in general, in China's case, current account balance is more or less the same as trade balance. Well, in certain cases, when current account balance is smaller, that means income generated in China is being transferred abroad. That means, well, again, that's not so unnatural. China invited a lot of foreign direct investment, and so the Foxconn and TMSD, those have semiconductor plants in China, and then earning of those semiconductor companies of Taiwan is brought to Taiwan rather than staying in China. So China's case, earning money is almost exclusively by trade. And next, please. Well, as a result, of Japan's cumulative current account balance surplus, Japan has been continuously be the largest creditor nation in the world. This is this investment position, and blue is the assets that Japan has, and red is the liabilities Japan owes to the world, and green is the net assets. Net has consistently been positive in Japan's case. The total net international investment position in 2020, Japan is the largest, to be followed by Germany and China. Next, please. So Japan has a global reach. The next is Japan as a civilian development partner. From this on, I'm talking a bit of an advertisement of JICA. Well, this is the amount of ODA given to the rest of the world by G7 countries. And in the 21st century, the United States has been a rather dominant figure in extending ODA. And in the beginning, Japan, Germany, UK about the same level, and in the middle of but sometime from 2010s, Germany and UK increased ODA very much. And well, Japan did not increase ODA much, but in the late 2010s, Japan has been on the rise, and now fourth among the G7 countries. Of course, personally speaking, I would like to become number one. So I would argue against the Japanese finance ministry to, please increase our budget to become number one. And but often people do not appreciate very much about the simple desire of becoming number one. What's the meaning of number one? So I don't know. But with this amount of limited amount of resources, Japan is trying to do its best to promote development in many countries. Here, Japan do not resort to arms. Japan do not use military means. All things are conducted in a civilian manner. Next, please. Again, well, this is advertisement. JICA's global reach. We have 96 overseas offices. Well, domestically, we are doing some things fairly actively, 15 offices. And the number of countries that we are working are 139, using 96 offices. Next, please. And then if we look at JICA's activities in America, this JICA's position is not number one. The ODA to Latin America, dominant position was made by USA, 29%, Germany, 22%, and France 13%, Canada 7%, Japan is 6%. And so in terms of the monetary value, in Latin America, Japan is fifth. Next, please. Of this amount, what we are doing, the largest the portion is this finance and investment cooperation, and the technical cooperation is the next, and the pure grants are rather limited. Next, please. But I think we are doing useful projects. Some of the examples here. This environmental improvement project for the Tietê River Basin, Brazil. And this has contributed the reduction of floods damage. And then this is a water supply system in colonial Oviedo city. Next, please. Japan is a disaster-prone country, and we need to reduce disaster damage. And so in terms of JICA's activities, we are trying much to reduce disaster risk reduction in many parts of the world, including in Latin America. Next, please. Another type is improving the urban environment and reducing disparities, education, health, and medicine. And here I show the example of El Salvador and example of what we are doing in Bolivia. Next, please. Well, this is the uninteresting number to indicate what we are doing in Colombia. Until last year, 2022, Japan accepted training participants from Colombia, 5,500, and we sent Japanese experts 708, and JICA volunteer 439%. And then there are financial cooperations. Next, please. Well, under the current circumstances, what we're doing, most intensively in Colombia is demining. This formerly we said Project for Human Resource Development to implement comprehensive mine action. From 20. Well, this phase, we have a previous phase, and we conducted this, but we are going to do that in the coming years. And then also agriculture production is very important. And this is another example of what we do as a civilian development partner. We are not selling weapons. We are not extending military assistance. Next, please. I'm hopeful that even in terms of monetary terms, we would like to increase our assistance to Colombia. There was some difficult years of receiving previously given loan, and then so there was a negative period. But then over the past years, constantly we are financing many of the activities conducted in Colombia. Next, please. So I think I have established Japan is a mature, liberal democratic, and global civilian power. But this country called Japan is now being located in an increasingly intense geopolitical environment. Next, please. Well, the first typical example is our neighbors' activities. North Korea has developed a nuclear weapons program. And despite all international requests to terminate nuclear weapons program and missile launch programs, North Korea has consistently improved its capability. And nuclear, first North Korea said, oh, we have no nuclear weapons. And we are not intended to build any. But nowadays, they said openly they conducted nuclear weapons tests. The most recent one is 2017, 160 kilotons, much larger than nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. And then more conspicuous is the launching of a lot of missiles. Last year, 55 missiles were launched towards the Sea of Japan and toward the Pacific. And this year too, recently North Korea launched the ICBM class missiles. And so that creates a very tense international security circumstances. And the next is China's military buildup. This is the Chinese military budget, which used to be smaller than Japan's. Now it's more than 4 times larger than Japan. Japan, well, being a civilian country, didn't increase military expenditure. It has consistently been lower than 1% of GNI or GDP. And then, next please. China claims sovereignty over some of the countries which Japan had considered obviously Japanese until 1970s. China started claiming sovereignty over these Senkaku Islands in the early 1970s. But until recently, more specifically, until 2008, China did not send any ships around these islands. China simply said that these islands belong to China, but these islands are protected by Japan's sea coast guards. Next, please. But from 2008, for the first time, China sent its Coast Guard ship to the territorial waters of Senkaku. And then from 2012, consistently send ships every month. Next, please. So these North Korean activities and Chinese military expansion forced Japan to make certain responses. And first, the Japan-US alliance should be strengthened. And then Japan launched intelligence satellites, and Japan decided to deploy ballistic missile system. And then Japan decided to create much more effective system of decision-making with the introduction of National Security Council. And in 2015, the Japanese government decided to change the interpretation of Article 9 of the Constitution. And now it interprets that the Constitution does not prohibit the exercise of collective self-defense right. And last December, the Kishida government issued a new national security strategy, and which included Japan's position of counterattack capability, meaning, well, until now, Japan did not have medium-range missiles that could shoot against any country. But North Korea has intermediate-range missiles, a huge number, and China has more than 2000 intermediate range nuclear, nuclear as well as non-nuclear missiles. And so the government decided to introduce. Japan also has intermediate range cruise missiles and other types. And also, Kishida government has decided to increase the defense budget. And he said that Japan will increase defense budget to 2% of GNI in 5 years. But then, of course, even if Japan increased that amount, it won't reach China's level at all. China's military expenditure is more than 4 times larger than that. And even if Japan doubled that, if China continues to increase the military expenditure, that's not so. And so, Japan is a mature, liberal, democratic, global civilian power, but it has to react to geopolitical reality. Military expenditure had to go up, and Japan may possess more weapons, but I would argue that that wouldn't change the basic character of Japan as an international actor. Japan continues mainly be a global civilian power. But the current global crisis, on top of the geopolitical conditions around Japan, the current global crisis are also posing a lot of challenges to us. Next, please. What we observed over the last 3 or 4 years is really unprecedented. Climate change has intensified its damage to human beings. And then we experienced COVID-19 pandemic. That's a really once in a century thing. The last time that we had terrible pandemic was the Spanish influenza in 1919, exactly 100 years ago. And then on top of these, terrible things from the physical system and terrible things in living system, we had terrible things in social system. Russia invaded Ukraine. And these triple crises created all sorts of bad things around the world. The physical systems bring about earthquakes and tsunami and droughts and floods. But because of the Ukraine, you have food crisis, energy crisis, debt crisis, inflation, and then that could end up in political crisis around the world. What can we do? It's really a hard challenge that no single country can respond. So I believe JICA has to do a lot in collaboration with many countries. Because I not able to listing up all sending these e-mining equipments. JICA hasn't worked how much we can do, but we'll do as much as possible and as quickly as possible. And of course, as though limited, I think during this winter, what we did is to send about 300 power generators to Ukraine. As you know, the Russia launched missiles to target the infrastructure, and power outages occurred in Ukraine. And so, well, we think needed is sending generators as much as possible. These may not be sufficient in support of Ukraine's efforts of achieving its peace, but I think JICA has to do what it can do. And Japan, as a mature, liberal, democratic, global civilian power, has to do as it can do. With this, I would like to end my presentation and ready to have your comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Tanaka. Thank you very much por su presentación. Continuaremos con la conversación entre el señor Tanaka y la profesora Carolina Urrego Sandoval. Mientras organizamos el espacio aquí adelante, quiero hacer una breve presentación de la profesora. La profesora es doctora en Economía Política Internacional de King's College London. Tiene una maestría en Estudios Internacionales de Aarhus University en Dinamarca. Y su investigación se enfoca en la cooperación económica y comercial entre Latinoamérica y Asia-Pacífico, desarrollo y sostenibilidad. Profesora Carolina. Le voy a dar el...
Señor Tanaka. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Tanaka, for that very enlightening presentation about the history of Japan after the Cold War and the efforts that you have been recently doing and the work of JICA around the world. So thank you. It was very interesting. We don't have much time, and I want to use it in the best possible way, hopefully. I'm going to pose two questions that I kind of collected from the interest from my students and people that I have talked to recently. And the first one relates to something that you mentioned during the presentation, and it's the growing security threats that the Indo-Pacific region is facing. You mentioned some of the actions that Japan's been taking, but people are wondering about the role of Japan, Japan's cooperation in the region. So could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, thank you very much. I have one back. Well, as I said in the presentation, security conditions in East Asia and more broadly in the Pacific is quite troublesome. But you know, this area is a center of global economy, or center of dynamics of global economy. And then, oh, sorry, Indonesia is growing, and then India is growing. If a war takes place in the Indo-Pacific, the devastation that could be brought about is much more terrible than the war in Ukraine. We need to prevent the occurrence of war. And to do that, one possibility is to create a system of deterrence. That is, anyone who is intended to attack should know or in advance that their attack would not be successful and would bring about more damage to the attackers than the others. And that is the function of the military presence of the United States, US alliance system there. And Japan's defense buildup would become a part of such system of deterrence. But I think more should be done. And that more is to make the stake of the Indo-Pacific much higher so that no one is interested in destroying it. And how to do that? I think what should be done is to realize sustainable and prosperous development there. And Indo-Pacific region has a lot of demand for further development. There are prosperous countries like Singapore, but then there are poor countries too. And there are vulnerable peoples there. And traffic conditions may not be so good. Connectivity between countries are not good. And I believe what Japan should do and what JICA should do is to contribute to make the system of economy in the Indo-Pacific much more efficient and much more effective. And so that means in many ways we are supposed to do what we have done so far. JICA contributed a lot in construction of necessary infrastructure, port facilities and roads, and we are now financing the urban traffic systems, including subway and others in many parts of the world. And then we need to create a system that connects from East Asia to South Asia to Sub-Saharan Africa. And then, of course, in my personal view, when we said Indo-Pacific, Pacific includes Pacific coast of Latin America too. And so what we need to do is to connect all the way from Colombia to South Africa. And that's the sort of vision that we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Tanaka. The last part, I think it deserves a different conversation regarding the relationships between Pacific coastal countries, which is something that Latin America has been trying to do through the Pacific Alliance, for example. You mentioned the importance of cooperation in the Pacific and how under the current circumstances worldwide, we need more multilateralism, we need more cooperation, and that's what many countries are trying to do. Coming to the Latin American region, you mentioned some of the activities that JICA has been developing. And I mean, in the case of Colombia, we are very interested in your work as You have visited the country, for example, a couple of times. Your visit is the second visit of a JICA president in 40 years. So there is a lot of expectation on this side. And I think we would like to know, what are your expectations for the future of the Japan-Colombia relationship in, development and different dimensions?
Well, thank you very much. As one of the slides indicate, Japan's ODA to Colombia had experienced, down periods, and down periods mostly corresponded to the period of internal strife, conflicts. And our conviction is that when we have peace, we could do much activity and much more activity. And one of the reasons that JICA is currently engaged in demining project is because of the attachment of importance to human security that we uphold. But on top, in addition to that, we are convinced that if peace is consolidated and peace is enjoyed by all stakeholders, farmers and local communities, then that could become the foundation on which we could build a lot more sustainable and healthy society. Well, eventually you will lose population too, as we do. And then you need to create a stable and sustainable and better society. And for that purposes, we first consolidate peace. And together with consolidation of peace, we would like to have deeper conversation with the government of Colombia and the people of Colombia. What should be the projects that people in Colombia and people in Japan should jointly work together? Today I had the opportunity to talk with your vice president, and she mentioned a lot of interesting ideas where we can work with the promotion of fishing industry, the activities of waste management, and promotion of economic development near ports. These are the concrete examples that she raised to us that we are ready to consult with our counterparts. And given the potential of Colombia, I think there are lots of things we can do. I think one thing that the Madam Vice President and I agreed was that the Colombia and Japan is a close neighbor between which we have only sea.
Thanks a lot. Once again, Mr. Tanaka, it is very interesting what you just mentioned regarding the recent conversation you had with the vice president. We at Universidad de los Andes hope to join those conversations and hopefully further explore the relationship between the two countries and between Latin American countries and Japan. Again, maybe we can take just one or two quick questions from the audience.
Okay, so I have a short question basing on the slides that I just saw that Mr. Tanaka mentioned the conflict between Taiwan and China and the Japan influence there in the Pacific Ocean. But what about the conflict in the north? I've heard this in Hokkaido. There is a conflict with Russia for the Kuril Island, which Japan reclaims, but Russia has the control de facto of them. The Russia administrates. So does Japan have a plan to recover the Kuril Island, or they will leave it like how it is?
Well, as I said in my presentation, Japan is a civilian power, and Japan is a civilian power determined to follow the UN Charter and international law, which prohibits sovereign states to engage in military means to resolve international disputes. We have international disputes with Russia over what we call the Northern Territories, but we will never use military means to recover them. We are not like Russians.
We have another question here.
田中理事長、こんばんは。立命館アジア太平洋大学のゴメスと申します。実践に、JICA 研究所でお世話になりました。Very quickly, two very quick questions. First, you mentioned about Ukraine. Now the comment is around that because of hosting the G7, Japan should take leadership in the reconstruction of Ukraine. What's your opinion about that? Especially because the experience in Afghanistan was not that positive. I mean, in the long run, seeing what is going on in Afghanistan now. So your opinion about that. And second, the development charter is being revised. And I wonder what are your expectations given the geopolitical background that you are seeing now? Thank you.
Well, the first question is about the Ukraine reconstruction. I believe reconstruction of Ukraine requires the termination of war. Well, full-fledged reconstruction of Ukraine requires termination of war. So we need to persuade Russia to end aggression. But under the current circumstances, Mr. Putin didn't appear to end the war. So what we can do during the time when war continues, we have to design a system of support that we can make even while the war continues in the Donbas region. And then we would hope that Russia would use up all their missiles, but they are currently making missiles every week. And so reconstruction could become very hard as long as Russia continues to launch missiles in areas other than Donbas. And so that could be a very complex issues. But at least the international community should let the Ukrainian people and the government of Ukraine know that the significant amount of reconstruction effort should be, borne by the willing partners, G7 countries, including Japan. Well, moralistically, legalistically, reconstruction should be paid by Russians. But real politics does not guarantee the imperatives of moral and legal requirements. So I think G7 has to make all sorts of efforts for the type of reconstruction we can do. Well, how much we should do, JICA is not in a position to make any decision. It's in the case of Japan, that's the government's decision, Mr. Kishida's decision, and I cannot make any decision. But at least I can contribute to this effort by offering what type of projects could be useful for the reconstruction. As you know, Japan has a very important experience of reconstruction after East Japan great earthquakes and tsunami. And that was a huge project. And we could, I think, offer certain lessons that we learned. And then, of course, again, to repeat what I said, we have been working very closely with the Cambodians and Colombians in terms of demining. I think demining is very, very necessary for Ukraine to make a full-fledged recovery. So that's my response. And then the second question is what? Development charter is supposed to be ready sometime in the spring. I understand that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is now finalizing the draft. I think I was told that the initial draft should be put on public comment. And so you can know what is being written. But in my understanding, the Development Cooperation Charter is a document to emphasize more on possibilities of cooperation rather than confrontation. The national security strategy, by its own nature, had to focus on the necessities of defense. And but the Development Cooperation Charter, development cooperation is an open-ended activities, and we need to have as much cooperation as possible under the current compounded crisis. In order to resolve climate change, we need cooperation from China. As my graph indicates, the largest greenhouse gas emitter is China. If China doesn't cooperate, we cannot resolve climate change. And so I think development charter, no matter how it is written, is a document of cooperation.
Thank you for the questions and the very interesting answers. I think for the next, for this year, for probably next years, we'll be discussing cooperation, multilateralism, and the return of the questions regarding peace and stability and security as fundamental elements for development. Thanks, Mr. Tanaka, and thank you, everybody. I think I leave the floor to Catalina once again.
Muchas gracias a todos. Muchas gracias, señor Tanaka. Profesora Carolina, muchas gracias por este espacio, señor embajador, señor Sato. Y bueno, con esto damos cierre a esta conversación. Nos alegra haberlos tenido aquí con nosotros y los esperamos para próximas actividades. Muchas gracias a todos.